The grand piano sat in the corner of the private dining room, its polished black surface gleaming under the soft chandelier light. Ella noticed it the moment she walked in to set up for the evening's private party. She had been working at the Silver Spoon for almost 3 years now, but rarely got assigned to the exclusive back room where the city's elite hosted their gatherings. "Ella, less staring, more preparing," called out Miguel, the floor manager, as he bustled past with a stack of fresh linen napkins. "Mr. Harrington's party will be here in 30 minutes, and everything needs to be perfect." Ella nodded quickly and returned to arranging the silverware, but her eyes kept drifting back to the piano. It had been almost 5 years since she'd last played seriously. 5 years since she'd left the prestigious music program that was supposed to be her ticket to a different life. The dining room was transformed by 6 o'clock tables arranged in a U-shaped cupboard, with crisp white tablecloths, crystal glasses catching the light, and small floral arrangements adding touches of color. Ella and the other 2 servers assigned to the event, Tom and Lily, stood at attention as Miguel gave last-minute instructions. "Remember, these are Mr. Harrington's special guests. Business partners, investors, and friends. The wine being served tonight costs more than your monthly salary, so pour carefully," Miguel emphasized, straightening his tie nervously. "Mr. Harrington specifically requested you, Ella, because you handled his last dinner so well." Ella felt a small flicker of pride at that. She might not be playing concert halls as she'd once dreamed, but she took genuine satisfaction in doing her current job well. The quiet dignity of perfect service was something she'd come to appreciate. The guests began arriving at 6:30, dressed in designer clothes that Ella could identify but could never afford. Alexander Harrington, successful tech entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and owner of several properties around the city, greeted each arrival with practiced charm. He was in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone who was used to being listened to. "The usual martini, Mr. Harrington?" Ella asked when she approached him during the mingling phase. "Perfect memory as always," he replied with an approving nod, barely looking at her. "And make sure everyone's glass stays full. We're celebrating a major acquisition tonight." The evening progressed smoothly as Ella moved efficiently between the kitchen and dining room. She had mastered the art of being present without being noticed, anticipating needs before guests had to ask, appearing with water or wine just as a glass emptied, clearing plates at precisely the right moment. But throughout it all, the piano kept pulling at her attention. Between the main course and dessert, one of Harrington's guests, a woman in a midnight blue dress who'd had perhaps one too many glasses of champagne, wandered over to the piano. "Alex, why don't you ever play this beautiful thing?" she called out, running her fingers lightly across the closed lid. Harrington laughed. "Because it's purely decorative in my hands, Vivian. I bought it for the room because it looked right, not because anyone was going to play it." "Such a waste." The woman sighed dramatically. "A Steinway deserves to be played." Ella, who was clearing plates nearby, felt a jolt at hearing the brand name confirmed. A Steinway. She'd played on one exactly like it during her final recital before everything fell apart. "Maybe one of you has hidden talents?" Harrington suggested to his guests, who responded with polite laughter and headshakes. Ella was so distracted by the conversation that she didn't notice a guest pushing his chair back suddenly. She collided with him, sending the stack of plates in her hands clattering and a water glass spilling across the tablecloth, drops splashing onto the expensive carpet. The room fell silent. "I'm so sorry," Ella gasped, mortified, as she quickly grabbed napkins to soak up the spill. "I'll get this cleaned up right away." Harrington frowned, his good mood visibly dimming. "Perhaps you could pay more attention to your job and less to our conversations." "Yes, sir." "I apologize," Ella said, keeping her voice steady as she continued cleaning up the mess. The humiliation burned in her chest, but she kept her face carefully neutral. This was part of the job, too, absorbing the occasional rudeness with grace. Miguel appeared instantly, helping to change the tablecloth while shooting Ella a warning look. The moment passed, conversation resumed, and the desserts were served. But Ella could feel Harrington watching her more closely now, his earlier approval replaced with scrutiny. As the night progressed and more alcohol was consumed, the party grew louder. Harrington was telling an animated story about a recent sailing trip when he noticed Ella looking at the piano again as she served coffee. "You seem quite fascinated by my piano," he called out suddenly, Interrupting his own story, Ella froze, coffee pot in hand. "It's a beautiful instrument, sir. Do you play?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with a curious expression. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Ella felt her heart rate quicken. "I used to," she answered honestly, wishing immediately that she'd lied. "Used to?" Harrington raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "Either you can play or you can't." One of his guests, a kinder-looking older man, interjected. "Alex, leave the poor girl alone. She's trying to do her job." But Harrington had that gleam in his eye that wealthy men sometimes get when they found something entertaining. "No, I'm genuinely curious now," he insisted. "Our server apparently has opinions about my piano. I'd like to hear more." Ella considered her options quickly. Confrontation could cost her the job she desperately needed. Humility was the safer choice. "I studied piano for many years, but that was a long time ago," she said politely. "Your Steinway is simply a beautiful example of craftsmanship. I was admiring it as I would any fine art." Harrington seemed both surprised and amused by her articulate response. "Studied piano, did you? Where exactly does a waitress study piano?" The question hung in the air, its condescension obvious to everyone in the room. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Juilliard," Ella answered quietly, knowing as she said it that it sounded implausible. A beat of silence followed, then Harrington let out a bark of laughter. "Juilliard? Well, isn't that something? Tom, our bartender, was probably at Harvard Medical before he found his true calling mixing drinks." Some of the guests laughed nervously. Others looked embarrassed. "It's true, actually," Ella said, her voice still calm though her hands had tightened around the coffee pot. "I had a scholarship. Family circumstances required me to leave during my 3rd year." Harrington studied her face, trying to determine if she was making things up. Something in her steady gaze must have convinced him. "Well then," he said, rising from his chair with theatrical flair and gesturing toward the piano. "Why don't you play something for us? Show us what Juilliard's finest is doing serving coffee at the Silver Spoon." Miguel appeared at Ella's elbow, speaking in a low voice. "Mr. Harrington, our staff isn't permitted to—" "It's my party, Miguel," Harrington cut him off. "And I'm requesting a performance." He turned back to Ella. "Unless, of course, you were exaggerating your credentials." The room was completely silent now. Ella could feel sweat forming at her hairline, her heart pounding in her ears. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd performed for anyone, since her fingers had touched keys like those. Since the accident that had hospitalized her mother and sent Ella rushing home, student loans unpaid, dreams deferred. Harrington was still watching her, challenge in his eyes. Some of his guests looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few seemed to be enjoying the spectacle of her discomfort. "I can play," she said finally, setting down the coffee pot with deliberate care. "But I'm quite out of practice." "Wonderful." Harrington clapped his hands together. "Let's hear what a Juilliard education sounds like. And if you're actually good, I'll add a generous tip to tonight's bill." As Ella made her way to the piano, she could hear Miguel's distressed breathing behind her. This could cost them both their jobs if it went poorly. But something inside her had snapped at Harrington's smug challenge. 5 years of setting aside her passion, of pretending to be satisfied with a life far different from what she'd planned. It had built up a quiet reservoir of defiance that was now spilling over. She sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly, and lifted the cover from the keys. The ivory felt cool and familiar under her fingertips as she positioned her hands. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting muscle memory return, feeling the weight of everyone's stares on her back. Then Ella took a deep breath, opened her eyes, and began to play. The first notes Ella played were tentative. Her fingers remembered the keys but felt stiff, unpracticed. She started with something simple, a Bach prelude she had learned as a child. The familiar pattern helped calm her racing heart as muscle memory gradually returned. The dining room fell completely silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the piano in the corner, where the waitress they'd barely noticed all evening was beginning to play with increasing confidence. Harrington stood with his arms crossed, an amused smirk on his face as he waited for her to fail. But as the simple prelude came to an end, Ella didn't stop. Without pausing, she transitioned into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she had performed countless times, one that lived in her bones. As the hauntingly beautiful melody filled the room, Ella closed her eyes. The years fell away. She wasn't in a restaurant being humiliated for a wealthy man's entertainment. She was back in the practice rooms at school, preparing for recitals, her whole future bright with possibility. Her fingers moved more surely now, finding their old strength and flexibility, drawing out the emotional depths of the piece. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the shock on Harrington's face. The smirk was gone, replaced by genuine surprise. Some of his guests had moved closer to the piano. An older woman in the back had tears in her eyes. Ella finished the nocturne with a delicate final chord that hung in the air. For a moment no one spoke or moved, then applause erupted, enthusiastic, appreciative applause. That was unexpected, Harrington said, his voice lacking its earlier condescension. You actually can play. I told you, Ella replied simply, her hands still resting on the keys. The familiar ivory beneath her fingers felt like greeting an old friend after a long separation. Play, something else, called out one of the guests, the woman in the midnight blue dress, who had first mentioned the piano. Miguel was hovering anxiously by the door, clearly torn between his duty to run the service properly and the extraordinary situation unfolding. Ella caught his eye and he gave a small nod. The dinner was essentially over anyway. Desserts had been served, coffee poured. What would you like to hear? Ella asked, surprised by her own boldness. Something impressive, Harrington challenged, regaining some of his earlier attitude. Anyone can play a nocturne with enough practice. Show us what made Juilliard accept you. A murmur went through the room. Some guests seemed uncomfortable with his persistent testing, but others leaned forward, curious to see what would happen next. Ella took a deep breath. If he wanted impressive, she could deliver. She positioned her hands and launched into Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically demanding pieces in piano literature. Her fingers flew across the keys in dazzling leaps and runs, the rapid notes like shimmering bells. 2 minutes into the piece, even Harrington's composed expression had cracked into astonishment. By the halfway point, the entire room was transfixed. When she finished the final triumphant notes, there was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted in applause again, this time with cheers and whistles. Lily, the other server working that night, was gaping at her from near the kitchen door. Tom had abandoned his post at the bar to watch. Even the chef had emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron as he stared in amazement. The older gentleman who had tried to defend her earlier approached the piano. Young lady, that was extraordinary. Where did you study before Juilliard? With Mrs. Chen in my hometown, then with Professor Reynolds at the community college, Ella answered, feeling strangely lightheaded from the adrenaline of performing again after so long. Reynolds? Franklin Reynolds? The man asked, his eyebrows rising. Ella nodded. You know him? I should. I funded the music department where he teaches. He extended his hand. I'm David Wilson. I sit on the boards of several arts organizations. Harrington appeared at Wilson's side, his entire demeanor changed. David, you never mentioned your interest in classical piano before. You never asked, Alex, Wilson replied mildly, his focus still on Ella. What happened? Why did you leave Juilliard in your 3rd year? The question brought Ella back to reality. The warm glow of performing faded as memories of that difficult time resurfaced. My mother was in a serious car accident, she explained, her voice quieter now. She needed full-time care. I was the only family she had, so I came home. And the scholarship? Wilson asked gently. It covered tuition but not living expenses. I was already working 2 jobs while studying. When I left, the student loans came due. Then the medical bills, she trailed off, not wanting to detail her financial struggles to a room full of people who'd never had to choose between education and survival. Harrington was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Some of his guests were giving him disapproving glances for having put Ella on the spot in the first place. Well, he said, clearing his throat, that was certainly an interesting interlude. As promised, I'll be adding a substantial tip to tonight's bill. Alex, Wilson interjected, I think we might do better than that. He turned back to Ella. Do you still practice? She shook her head. I don't have access to a piano anymore. The apartment I share is too small and I work most days. That's a criminal waste of talent, Wilson stated firmly. Harrington, perhaps sensing an opportunity to salvage his reputation after his earlier behavior, jumped in. The university has that fundraising gala next month. They're always looking for impressive performances. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. Indeed they are. And the symphony has their community spotlight series. Ella felt as though she was floating outside her body, listening to these wealthy strangers suddenly discussing her musical future, as if the past 5 years of struggle hadn't happened. I appreciate your interest, she said carefully. But this is my life now. I can't just jump back into music. I have responsibilities, bills to pay. Everyone has bills, Harrington said dismissively. But not everyone can play Liszt like that. Miguel, who had been watching the scene unfold with increasing concern, finally approached. Mr. Harrington, I apologize for the interruption of your evening. Ella, if you could help with coffee service. Miguel, Harrington interrupted. Your server just gave my guests the most entertainment they've had at one of my dinners in years. I think coffee can wait. The woman in midnight blue appeared at the piano, champagne glass in hand. You must play one more piece, something you love. Ella hesitated, looking at Miguel, who simply threw up his hands in surrender to the situation. Go ahead, he sighed. Apparently tonight is a piano recital now. The guests laughed, the tension breaking. Ella thought for a moment, then began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune. The dreamy, impressionistic piece had always been her favorite, the one she played for herself, not for competitions or recitals, as the gentle, flowing melody filled the room. Ella felt something unlock inside her chest. Music had been such an essential part of her identity for so long. Losing it had been like losing a limb. Now, playing again after 5 years, she realized how much she'd been suppressing her grief over that loss. When she finished, the applause was gentler this time, more respectful. Several people had tears in their eyes, moved by the emotional quality of her playing. Wilson handed her a business card. Call my office tomorrow. I mean it. Harrington, not to be outdone, added his own card. My foundation funds several arts initiatives. We should talk. The party began to break up shortly after. As guests retrieved their coats and made their way out, many stopped to shake Ella's hand or offer words of encouragement. The woman in midnight blue hugged her impulsively. You just made a room full of jaded people feel something real. Don't let that gift go to waste again. After the last guest departed, Ella began clearing the remaining dishes, trying to process everything that had happened. The other staff were stealing glances at her, whispering among themselves. Miguel approached her as she loaded glasses onto a tray. Well, that was certainly not in the service manual, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. I'm sorry, Ella replied. I know it was unprofessional. Unprofessional? You just got a standing ovation from some of the wealthiest people in the city. He shook his head in disbelief, including 2 who sit on the restaurant owner's board of directors. Are you firing me? She asked directly. Miguel laughed. Fire you? After the owner gets a call from David Wilson about his amazing pianist Waitress? I'll probably be asked to schedule your shifts around piano practice. He studied her face. You're really that good, aren't you? Like professionally good? Ella shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. I was once. I don't know what I am now. As she helped finish cleaning up, Ella's mind was whirling with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider for years. The business cards felt heavy in her pocket. Could she really find her way back to music after all this time? Did she even want to? The night had started with humiliation and ended with something like triumph. But as she hung up her apron at the end of her shift, Ella wasn't sure if anything would actually change. People like Harrington and Wilson made grand gestures in the moment, but their attention quickly moved on to the next interesting thing. Still, as she walked to the bus stop under the stars, her fingers were moving against her leg, playing invisible keys, remembering what it felt like to create something beautiful. The next morning, Ella woke up with a strange mixture of hope and doubt swirling in her mind. The events of the previous night seemed almost dreamlike. Had she really played Liszt for a room full of wealthy strangers? Had David Wilson, whose name she recognized from donor plaques at Juilliard, really given her his business card? She reached for her uniform jacket draped over a chair and pulled out the 2 cards. They were real, tangible proof that something extraordinary had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Boss wants to see you before your shift today. Don't worry, it's good news. Ella's roommate Zoe shuffled into their tiny kitchen, yawning and reaching for the coffee pot. You got in late last night. Bad shift? Actually, it was interesting. Ella said, still processing everything herself. She briefly explained what had happened. Zoe's eyes widened. Wait, you actually played? In front of everyone? And these rich people want to help you? They said they do, Ella replied cautiously. But you know how it is. People make grand promises in the moment that they forget about the next day. Call them, Zoe urged. What do you have to lose? Ella stared at Wilson's card. My dignity? My time? My hope? She sighed. It took years to accept that music wasn't going to be my life anymore. I don't know if I can handle getting my hopes up again. And what about your mom? Wouldn't she be thrilled? Ella smiled sadly. She would. She always believed I'd find my way back to it somehow. Her mother had passed away just last year, never fully recovering from her injuries but always insisting that Ella would play professionally again someday. Then call. For her, if not for yourself. With trembling fingers, Ella dialed Wilson's number before she could talk herself out of it. To her surprise, his assistant put her through immediately. Ah, the pianist from last night, Wilson said warmly when he came on the line. I was hoping you'd call. I've already spoken to several people about you. You have? Ella asked, caught off guard. Indeed. The university's music department is very interested in having you audition for their community artist program. It includes access to their practice rooms and performance spaces. I don't know what to say. Say yes to the audition, Wilson replied simply. It's next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Can you make it? Ella thought about her work schedule. I'd have to ask for time off. I've already spoken to Robert, the owner of the Silver Spoon. He's quite excited about having a Juilliard pianist on staff. You'll have the time off. After hanging up, Ella sat in stunned silence until Zoe waved a hand in front of her face. Well, what did he say? He set up an audition for me. At the university. And apparently he's already talked to my boss about giving me time off for it. Zoe squealed and hugged her. That's amazing. But wait, you haven't played regularly in years. How are you going to prepare? The question hit Ella like a bucket of cold water. I don't know. I don't even have a piano. What about that fancy man from last night? The one who made you play in the first place? Didn't he give you his card too? Ella looked at Harrington's card skeptically. I'm not calling him. Why not? He embarrassed you publicly. The least he can do is let you practice on his piano. Ella shook her head firmly. No, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it on my own terms. I'll figure something out. Later that morning, Ella arrived at the Silver Spoon earlier than her shift required. Robert, the owner, whom she'd only seen a handful of times in her years working there, was waiting in his office. There she is, he exclaimed when she entered. My secret weapon. Why didn't you ever tell us you were a piano prodigy? Ella shifted uncomfortably. I'm hardly a prodigy, sir. And it didn't seem relevant to serving tables. Well, it's relevant now, he said, beaming. I've had 3 calls this morning about you. Wilson, Harrington, and Mrs. Blackwell, the lady in the blue dress. They were all raving about your playing. That's nice of them. Nice. It's fantastic. Do you know how long I've been trying to get those people to notice this place? And now they're talking about coming back regularly. He leaned forward. Here's what I'm thinking. 2 nights a week, you play the piano during dinner service. Nothing too showy, just background music. We'll promote it, bring in a different crowd. I'll pay you extra, of course. Ella blinked, trying to absorb this unexpected offer. But I don't practice regularly. I'd need access to a piano. Already solved, Robert said, gesturing for her to follow him. He led her to the private dining room where she'd played the night before. I've had this piano for years as a decoration. Never thought about actually using it. It's yours to practice on whenever the room isn't booked. Ella approached the Steinway reverently, running her fingers lightly over the keys. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Robert replied, just as Wilson had earlier. This is good business for me and a second chance for you. Okay, Ella agreed, a smile spreading across her face. Yes. For the next week, Ella arrived at the restaurant hours before her shift to practice. At first, her fingers were stiff and clumsy, her technique rusty. But each day, more of her training returned. The muscle memory was still there, buried beneath years of carrying trays and pouring coffee. She started with basic exercises, scales, arpeggios, Hanon studies before moving on to pieces she once knew by heart. Some came back easily. Others required patient relearning. She worked through lunch breaks and stayed after closing, playing until her fingers ached and her back screamed from sitting on the piano bench for so long. Miguel and the other staff would sometimes pause in their duties to listen, shaking their heads in amazement. "I still can't believe you kept this hidden," Lily told her during a break. "It's like finding out the quiet girl at school is secretly a superhero." "Hardly a superhero," Ella laughed. "Just someone who used to be good at something and is trying to be good at it again." The night before her audition, Harrington returned to the restaurant, this time alone. Ella was practicing a particularly difficult passage from a Beethoven sonata when he appeared in the doorway of the private dining room. "You're getting better," he observed after. Listening for a few minutes, Ella's hands faltered on the keys. "Mr. Harrington, I didn't realize you were here. Just came for dinner and heard you playing." He entered the room, standing awkwardly by the piano. "Wilson tells me you have an audition tomorrow." "Yes." She straightened the sheet music in front of her, unsure what else to say. Harrington cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology for my behavior the other night. I was less than gracious." Ella looked up, surprised by his admission. "You were." He winced at her bluntness but nodded. "Fair enough. In my defense, I've attended countless charity events where wealthy donors claim various artistic talents they don't actually possess. I assumed you were exaggerating. Because waitresses can't be classical pianists?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because people in general often present themselves as more accomplished than they are," he corrected. "But you're the real thing." "I was," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be again." Harrington studied her for a moment. "Why did you really stop playing? And don't give me the short version you told Wilson." Ella sighed, her fingers idly finding a minor chord on the piano. "My mother had multiple sclerosis. The car accident accelerated her decline. She needed full-time care, which insurance wouldn't cover. I had two choices: stay at school while she went into a facility she didn't want to be in, or come home and take care of her myself. No siblings, other family." She shook her head. "Just us. Dad left when I was little, so I came home, got whatever jobs I could find, and took care of her. The loans came due, medical bills piled up, and eventually I sold my piano. Music became a luxury I couldn't afford." Harrington was quiet for a long moment. "And now?" "And now she's gone," Ella said simply. "She died last year believing I'd find my way back to music someday. I'm not sure if this audition is about fulfilling her dream or mine." "Does it matter?" he asked. "Either way, you're playing again." Ella considered this. "I guess it doesn't." "Play something," he requested, his tone different from the demanding challenge of their first encounter. "Something that matters to you." Ella turned back to the piano and began playing Schubert's Impromptu in G-flat major. The piece flowed from her fingers with a warmth and expressiveness that had been missing from her technical exercises. When she finished, she didn't look up right away, lost in the emotions the music had stirred. "That was beautiful," Harrington said quietly. "Different from the other night. The other night I was proving something," she explained. "Tonight I'm just playing." He nodded as if he understood the distinction. "I have connections at the Symphony Center. After your audition tomorrow, call me, regardless of the outcome." "Why would you help me?" she asked directly. Harrington smiled slightly. "Let's just say I recognize the look of someone who's found their way back to something they love. It's rare enough that it should be encouraged." He turned to leave, then paused. "Good luck tomorrow, though I doubt you'll need it." After he left, Ella remained at the piano, feeling oddly encouraged by the conversation. Whatever his initial motivation for challenging her had been, Harrington seemed genuinely interested in helping now. As she gathered her music to leave for the night, Ella realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time in years, she was allowing herself to want something beyond mere survival. Whether tomorrow's audition went well or not, music had found its way back into her life, and that alone felt like a victory. The university's music building was exactly how Ella remembered such places: the soundproofed practice rooms, the faint strains of various instruments seeping through doors, the serious-faced students hurrying through hallways with instrument cases and stacks of sheet music. It felt both familiar and foreign, like visiting a childhood home now occupied by strangers. She arrived for her audition 30 minutes early, dressed in her best non-work clothes, dark slacks, and a simple blue blouse. As she signed in at the reception desk, her hands trembled slightly. "You can warm up in practice room 3, the receptionist told her, handing her a visitor's badge. Ella froze. Professor Chen? Olivia Chen? The receptionist nodded. Yes, she's heading the community artist program this year. Do you know her? Ella felt her stomach drop. Olivia Chen had been on the faculty at Juilliard during her time there, a brilliant, demanding teacher known for her uncompromising standards. Ella had taken one of her master classes and still remembered the cutting critique Chen had delivered about her. Technically proficient but emotionally shallow. Interpretation of a Rachmaninoff. Prelude. We've met, Ella said weakly, making her way to the practice room. The upright piano in the room was well maintained, but nothing like the Steinway she'd been practicing on. Ella warmed up mechanically, her mind racing with new doubts. Chen would remember her. Would remember that she'd left Juilliard without completing her degree. Would see how much ground she'd lost in the years since. At 2 minutes before 2, Ella gathered her music and made her way to the recital hall. Taking a deep breath outside the door, she squared her shoulders and walked in. The large hall was empty except for 3 people sitting in the front row. David Wilson, a man she didn't recognize, and Professor Chen, whose elegant posture and scrutinizing gaze hadn't changed in the years since Ella had last seen her. Ah, here she is, Wilson said warmly, standing to greet her. Ella, this is Dean Roberts, head of the music department, and I believe you know Professor Chen. Chen studied Ella with narrowed eyes. Thompson, isn't it? You were at Juilliard. Scholarship student. Left suddenly in your 3rd year. Ella swallowed hard. Yes, that's right. Family emergency. Chen's expression revealed nothing. And now you're a waitress who plays piano. Among other things, Ella replied, finding her voice. I'm also a daughter who took care of her dying mother. A person who pays her bills on time and a musician who never stopped loving music, even when I couldn't play it. Wilson looked slightly uncomfortable at the tension between them. Well, shall we get started? Ella, whenever you're ready. She placed her music on the piano, a grand Yamaha that gleamed under the stage lights. As she sat on the bench and adjusted it to her height, Ella tried to quiet the riot of nerves in her stomach. What will you be playing for us? Dean Roberts asked. I've prepared Bach's Prelude in C major, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata First Movement, and Debussy's Clair de Lune, she answered. A safe program, Chen commented. The implied criticism was clear. Ella had chosen pieces she knew well, ones she could play confidently despite her years away from serious practice. But Chen's remark stung. It echoed the criticism from that long-ago masterclass, playing it safe, lacking emotional depth or artistic courage. Something shifted inside Ella. She'd spent a week preparing diligently, determined to prove she still had technical skill. But sitting here now, she realized that technical skill alone wouldn't impress Chen. It never had. Actually, she said, closing her music book, I'd like to change my program. If that's all right. Wilson and the dean looked surprised. Chen raised an eyebrow, the first hint of interest crossing her face. I'll be playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was a notoriously difficult piece, technically challenging and emotionally complex. Ella had performed it for her final recital before leaving Juilliard. She hadn't practiced it in years, are you sure? Wilson asked quietly. Ella nodded. If she was going to fail, she would fail playing something that mattered, something that required not just her fingers but her heart. Without further preamble, she began. The opening phrases were tentative, her fingers seeking the patterns they once knew so well. But as the piece progressed, something remarkable happened. The music seemed to find her, rather than the other way around. Passages she thought she'd forgotten came back, not perfectly but with genuine feeling. She made mistakes, missed notes, blurred runs, a fumbled transition. But between those technical imperfections there were moments of real beauty, of authentic emotion. Ella played not as she had at Juilliard, concerned with impressing judges and earning grades, but as someone who had loved and lost and found her way back to something precious. When she finished, her heart was racing and her face flushed. She kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up and see Chen's critical gaze. The silence stretched for several seconds before Dean Roberts cleared his throat. Well, that was certainly interesting, Chen finished for him. You've lost technique. Ella nodded, accepting the assessment. Yes, but you've gained something else. Chen stood and approached the piano. 5 years ago, you played every note correctly and I felt nothing. Today, you missed a dozen notes and I felt everything. That's growth of a kind. Ella finally looked up, surprised by the almost approving tone. You need work, Chen continued briskly. Your technique is rusty, your dynamics uneven, and you're pedaling heavy-handed. But the musicality is there. It always was beneath the perfectionism. Wilson and the dean exchanged glances, clearly not following the nuances of the critique. So, Wilson ventured, would she be a good fit for the program? Chen considered Ella for a long moment. No. Ella's heart sank. The community program wouldn't challenge her enough, Chen clarified. I want her in my advanced performance seminar. Limited enrollment graduate-level work? The dean looked startled. But she doesn't have her undergraduate degree completed. Then she'll audit, Chen said with a dismissive wave. And practice. 4 hours daily, minimum. The department can provide access to practice rooms. She fixed Ella with an intense look. You'll need to quit waitressing. I can't, Ella replied immediately. I have rent, bills, student loans. I've already thought of that, Wilson interjected. My foundation has a living stipend program for exceptional artists. It's not lavish, but it covers basic expenses for a year. Consider it an investment in your future. Ella felt as though the floor was shifting beneath her. This is happening too fast. No, Chen contradicted. It's happening 5 years too late. The question is whether you wanted enough to make up for lost time. That was the question, wasn't it? Did she still want this life? The demanding practice schedule, the critiques, the uncertainty? She'd built a different existence for herself, humble but stable. Taking this chance meant dismantling that carefully constructed security. I need time to think, she said finally. Chen nodded, surprisingly understanding. Take the weekend. Classes start Monday. If you're serious, be at my seminar at 10 a.m., practice room 12. If not, she shrugged. Enjoy playing at the restaurant. As Ella gathered her things to leave, Wilson walked her to the door. For what it's worth, I've never seen Chen that impressed by anyone. And I've been funding this department for 20 years. Outside in the bright afternoon sun, Ella felt disoriented by how quickly her life might be changing again. She checked her phone and saw 3 missed calls from the restaurant. With a sigh, she returned the call. Ella? Where are you? Miguel sounded stressed. You were supposed to be here an hour ago for your shift. I'm sorry, the audition ran long. I'm on my way now. Actually, don't hurry. We're okay for the moment. His voice softened. How did it go? Honestly? I'm not sure. But I think they want me to go back to school. That's amazing, Miguel exclaimed. Though selfishly, I'd hate to lose my best server. And Robert's new piano player. Ella smiled at his kind words. I haven't decided anything yet. There's a lot to consider. Like what? Seems like a no-brainer to me. Like completely changing my life again. Giving up a steady income for a stipend that might not cover everything. Going back to a world that's all about competition and criticism. She sighed. I've spent 5 years just trying to keep my head above water. I'm not sure I remember how to swim. Well, there's one person who might help you figure it out, Miguel said. Harrington called twice today asking for you. Said it was important. Ella frowned. Did he say what he wanted? Nope. Just that he needed to speak with you today if possible. He left his number. After hanging up, Ella stared at the number Miguel had given her. Despite their recent civil conversation, she still felt wary of Harrington. His initial mockery had stung, and his current interest seemed suspect. Was he truly trying to help, or was she just an interesting project for him? The waitress with hidden talents, a story to tell at his next dinner party. But he had connections at the Symphony Center, connections that could potentially provide income more stable than Wilson's 1-year stipend. And unlike Wilson or Chen, Harrington understood the business side of the arts. Taking a deep breath, Ella made the call. To her surprise, he answered immediately. Ella, how did the audition go? Complicated, she replied. I'm not sure if it was a success or a failure. Intriguing. Can you meet me at the Symphony Center in an hour? There's something I want to show you. Ella hesitated. I'm supposed to be at work. I've already spoken to Robert. He's fine with you taking the evening off. Before she could object to his presumption, he added, Please, it might help you make your decision. Curiosity won out over caution. All right, 1 hour. As she ended the call, Ella wondered what exactly she was walking into. But after years of playing it safe, perhaps it was time to take some risks, both in music and in life. The Symphony Center stood in the heart of downtown, its grand architecture a testament to the city's commitment to the arts. Ella had walked past it countless times over the years but had only been inside once, for a student concert during her first year at community college. Back then she'd imagined herself performing on that illustrious stage someday. That dream had faded along with so many others. Harrington was waiting for her in the lobby, looking different in casual clothes. Dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt rather than his usual tailored suit. "You came," he said, sounding pleased. "Follow me. I've arranged a private tour." "I've seen the main hall before," Ella said as they walked through the quiet corridors. "Not like this," Harrington replied with a small smile. "And there's more to the Symphony Center than just the main hall." They passed through a side door, marked staff only, and down a hallway lined with framed photographs of famous musicians who had performed there over the decades. Ella recognized many of the faces, legendary pianists, conductors, and composers whose music she had studied and played. "The symphony runs several community outreach programs," Harrington explained as they walked. "Master classes for gifted students, workshops for teachers, concerts in underserved neighborhoods. They're always looking for talented musicians who can connect with people from all backgrounds." Ella gave him a questioning look. "And you're telling me this because they need a program coordinator for their piano division," he answered. "Someone with both musical training and real-world experience. Someone who understands what it means to love music but face practical barriers to pursuing it. Someone like me," Ella said slowly, beginning to understand. "Exactly. The position includes a reasonable salary, benefits, and, most importantly, access to their practice facilities and performance spaces." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You'd be teaching, organizing, and performing, not waitressing." Ella's mind raced with possibilities. "Did you arrange this because you felt guilty about embarrassing me?" Harrington laughed. "I'm not that noble. I arranged it because you're genuinely talented, and the symphony needs someone exactly like you." His expression turned more serious. "Though yes, I do regret my behavior that night." Before she could respond, they reached a door labeled Rehearsal Hall, B. Harrington pushed it open to reveal a beautiful room with warm wooden, acoustical panels and a stunning grand piano on a small stage. "This is where chamber groups rehearse," he explained. "It's available to staff during off hours." He gestured toward the piano. "Go ahead. Try it." Ella approached the instrument almost reverently. It was a Bosendorfer, even finer than the Steinway at the restaurant. She sat on the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "The job starts next month," Harrington continued. "I've already spoken to the director. She's eager to meet you, but the position is yours if you want it." Ella finally pressed a key, the pure tone resonating through the room. "Why are you doing this?" Harrington was quiet for a moment. "My mother was a pianist," he said finally. "Not professionally, she taught elementary school music, but she played beautifully. I grew up listening to her practice after dinner every night." His voice softened with memory. "She wanted to study at a conservatory, but her family couldn't afford it. So she found another way to keep music in her life." "What happened to her?" Ella asked gently. "Cancer, 10 years ago." He cleared his throat. "She never resented the path her life took, but I always wondered what might have been if she'd had the opportunities she deserved." Ella nodded, understanding now. "So I'm your second chance for her." "No," Harrington corrected. "You're your own second chance. I'm just opening a door. You still have to walk through it." Ella played a simple chord progression, feeling the instrument respond to her touch. "And what about Professor Chen's offer? The advanced seminar?" "I know about that too. Wilson called me after your audition." Harrington leaned against the wall. "You could do both, you know. The symphony position is flexible enough to accommodate some classes." "You've thought of everything," Ella said, shaking her head in amazement. "Not everything. I can't decide for you." "No one can." He checked his watch. "I need to go. Take your time here, they know you're coming. The director will be in her office until 6 if you want to speak with her." He handed her a business card. "5th floor, Suite 512. After Harrington left, Ella remained at the piano thinking. In the span of just over a week, her life had completely upended. From a waitress with a buried past to a musician with multiple opportunities, it seemed too good to be true. She began to play, testing the beautiful instrument with scales that turned into arpeggios, then became the opening of a Chopin nocturne. The acoustics in the room were perfect, the sound enveloping her like a warm embrace. As she played, Ella thought about the choices before her. She could return to school with Wilson's stipend, focusing entirely on rebuilding her technique under Chen's demanding tutelage. She could take the symphony position and build a career that balanced performance with education and outreach. She could even stay at the restaurant, playing 2 nights a week while maintaining the stable life she'd created, or perhaps there was a fourth path, one that combined elements of all 3. The music flowed from her fingers as her mind worked through the possibilities. What did she truly want? Not what her mother had wanted for her, or what Chen thought she should do, or what Harrington was offering. What did Ella herself want at this point in her life? She finished the nocturne and sat in silence, listening to the final notes fade away. Then she reached for her phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Miguel. "I won't be in tomorrow," she told him. "I need the weekend to figure some things out." The second was to Wilson. "I'd like to accept the stipend," she said when he answered, "but with some modifications." The third was to Zoe. "Can you meet me at home?" she asked her roommate. "I need to talk through some big decisions." On Monday morning at precisely 10 a.m., Ella walked into practice room 12 where Professor Chen was waiting, a stack of music on the piano. "You came," Chen said, sounding neither surprised nor pleased, just matter of fact. "With conditions," Ella replied. "I'll attend your seminar and practice as required. But I'm also accepting a position at the Symphony Center. I'll be dividing my time between study, work, and performance." Chen frowned. "That's not the typical arrangement for my students." "I'm not your typical student," Ella pointed out. "I'm almost 30, with real-world responsibilities and experiences most of your students don't have. I can't just go back to being a full-time student." "You're setting yourself up for failure by dividing your focus," Chen warned. "Maybe," Ella acknowledged. "Or maybe I'm creating a sustainable life that includes music in multiple forms. I've already tried the all-or-nothing approach. It didn't work for me." Chen studied her with keen eyes. "You've changed since Juilliard. Life will do that." After a long moment, Chen nodded. "Very well. We'll try it your way. But," she added sternly, "I still expect excellence in this seminar. No excuses." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Ella replied with a small smile. That evening, Ella played her first official performance as the restaurant's pianist. Robert had promoted the event enthusiastically, and the main dining room was full of curious patrons. She wore a simple black dress that Zoe had helped her choose, professional but not too formal. As she settled at the piano, Ella spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Wilson and his wife at one table, Harrington dining alone at another, and even Professor Chen sitting in the corner, her critical gaze as sharp as ever. Ella had carefully selected her program for the evening, a mix of classical pieces and more accessible contemporary compositions, music that would appeal to casual listeners while still showcasing her abilities. It wasn't a prestigious concert hall, but it was a place to begin rebuilding her identity as a performer. "Good evening," she said into the small microphone that had been set up. "My name is Ella Thompson. Until recently, I was your server. Tonight, I'm your pianist." A warm round of applause followed, particularly enthusiastic from the staff members who had gathered near the kitchen door to watch. Ella began with a piece she'd never performed publicly before, a composition she'd written herself during her first year at Juilliard, and recently rediscovered in an old notebook. It was simple but heartfelt, with a melody that spoke of longing and return. As she played, Ella felt a sense of rightness wash over her. This new path wouldn't be easy. Balancing Chen's demanding seminar with the symphony position would require careful time management. Adding performances at the restaurant made it even more challenging. But for the first time in years, all the pieces of her life seemed to fit together. Music was no longer a painful reminder of what she'd lost, but a bridge between her past and her future. When she finished her original composition, the applause was genuine and appreciative. Ella glanced around the room at the people who had, each in their own way, made this moment possible, from Miguel, who had always treated her with respect, to Wilson, who had offered opportunity, to Harrington, who had challenged her and then opened doors, to Chen, who would push her to excel. But most of all, she thought of her mother, who had always believed this day would come. "This next piece," Ella said into the microphone, "is for my mother, who taught me that it